This panel will unpack what innovation really is and which tools are used to achieve true innovation. It's my great privilege to introduce our panel moderator, Dr. Nils Fonstad. He is a research scientist at MIT CISR, based in Madrid. He researches competitive digital innovation and identifies which digital investments and innovation practices distinguish the most competitive firms. So please help me in welcoming Dr. Nils Fonstad.
Thank you, Ben. Okay, well, we originally were going to have 4 panelists in this session. Unfortunately, Federico Flores, who's the Chief Information and Innovation Officer for Ferrovial, he broke his ankle. So that's why I've asked the remaining 3 panelists to start on stage so that we have no risks of additional ankle breaking. But he was very frustrated that he couldn't join us. He loves coming to MIT's campus, is a regular here, and sends his regrets. But hopefully he will recover fast enough so that for the next event that we have, he can join us. So Federico is not going to be with us. We do have, though, 3 very experienced and very insightful panelists that will be joining us. So Kris from Ricoh, we have Roman from BNY Mellon, and we've got Brendan from Topcoder. I want to first set the stage with regards to digital innovation and the challenges that we see a lot of companies face with regards to digital innovation. It has become easier than ever before to start an innovation effort. However, most companies that I talk to struggle to realize significant business value from their innovation efforts. They struggle to stop innovation efforts. They struggle to measure the value and assess whether an innovation effort is worth continuing or not. And as a result, a lot of companies are falling into 2 broad pitfalls that I've identified. The first pitfall is the accumulation of fondue sets. So I'm someone who loves to cook. And so I'm often in the kitchen. I'm now based in Madrid, so you can imagine I've got all these amazing ingredients available to me. And my friends know that I love to cook. And so they asked me, Nils, do you like fondue? And I was like, are you kidding? I love fondue, right? And so they said, well, you know what you need is a fondue set. And I was like, well, that sounds like a great idea. So I said yes to their request to see if I liked fondue. And I wanted a fondue set. However, how many of you have fondue sets? Just a show of hands here. Let's be honest here. Okay, right? We have fondue. There we go. Good. There's over there 3 fondue sets, right? So you're probably like me, if you're honest, right? How often do you use that fondue set? Right? Fondue sets, this is the issue with fondue sets. They're nice to have, but at the end of the day, they add little, if any, business value, right? And so a lot of innovation efforts that our companies are funding and supporting, the problem is they end up as fondue sets. We end up accumulating fondue sets. The other pitfall that I see companies fall into is another food metaphor. It's what I call binging. Companies are investing in a whole portfolio of different innovation efforts. And unfortunately, in their pursuit for a business objective like, say, customer satisfaction, they end up investing too much of their efforts on a specific type of innovation, specifically customer-facing innovations, and not enough on other types of innovations, such as operational improvements. So in the short term, we may end up improving our Net Promoter Score or whatever metric we're using to assess whether or not we're achieving the business objective of customer satisfaction. But in the long term, we end up realizing that in the process, we've overcomplicated our operations, and our cost to serve has also gone skyrocketing. And then we end up switching all of our innovation efforts towards a new objective, which is business process efficiency. And we think that the way to achieve business process efficiency is investing most of our portfolio into operational efficiency efforts. And it turns out my research shows that actually to achieve both of those kinds of objectives, whether it's customer satisfaction, whether it's business process efficiency, or whether it's revenue growth, top performers are taking a balanced approach by investing across 4 types of innovation that I'll talk about. So we're trying to avoid 2 broad challenges here. We're trying to avoid the accumulation of fondue sets, and we're trying to not end up binging. One example that I like to bring up of a company that learned the hard way is Deutsche Telekom. Deutsche Telekom is a German telco, and back in 2013, they said, we need to be more innovative, because they were essentially supporting all these companies that make up what we refer to as the digital economy, right? The Netflix, the Salesforces, all these companies that rely on telco services, but they're getting much better margins than the telcos. And so Deutsche Telekom in 2013 said, we want a piece of that, right? We want to get those margins, but to get those, we need to be innovative like these companies. And so they did their homework, and they said, well, what does it take to be an innovative company? And they realized, oh, there's this thing called open innovation. So we need to set up a digital hub. And they did. They went to Berlin, found an abandoned factory, got some very funky programmers to go into the factory, and they set up a cool space, and they checked that box. And they got a lot of great press for their cool, funky hub in this cool part of Berlin. They also learned about, back in 2013, this thing called Agile. Agile was becoming big, and they said, we have to do Agile, and we have to do it at scale. And so they did check that box. They were checking off all the right ingredients of what it takes to be an innovative company, but a year into their efforts, the executive committee said, all right, well, we've been investing in this thing called digital innovation. Where's the business value in all this? And no one had an answer for it. Okay, well, it's digital innovation. Let's give it another year. 2 years later, executive committee asks the same question. Where's the business value in all these efforts? No answer. Let's just say that the CEO left and a new CEO came on board and said what, in fact, did happen to all of these investments in digital innovation. And they found out that they had been investing in 64 different areas of innovation, of which only one proved somewhat fruitful. It was a digital book reader that competes with Amazon's Kindle. They sold that off. They had been accumulating in 64 fondue sets. And they had to change completely their approach to digital innovation. And they ended up changing towards what my colleague Jeannie Ross and I call a test and learn approach to digital innovation. And looking at companies like Deutsche Telekom and other companies that have changed dramatically their approach to digital innovation, we've identified 3 principles around which companies are building test and learn capabilities. I want to first thank our sponsors and our patrons for their support in this research. They have been instrumental in this, and by talking to them and other companies, many other companies, the 3 principles, the very first of those 3 principles is to ensure that innovation efforts are linked to a clear vision and small set of objectives. In the case of Deutsche Telekom, the new CEO came up with a new vision of what Deutsche Telekom as a company was going to try to achieve and said, the way I believe we're going to realize this vision is by focusing our innovation efforts in 5 areas of innovation, what they called the 4+1 model. And all you need to know at this point, and there's a whole case study on this if you want to learn more, but the 4+1 model, instead of 64 areas of innovation, they said, we think, our hypothesis is, we can realize this vision by investing in these 4 areas. Now imagine the 5. The 4+1, the 4 is like a hashtag. So you can imagine 2 areas are vertical and then 2 are horizontal. The 2 verticals were each focused on a specific set of customer needs. These are what we call external-facing, revenue-generating areas of innovation. And the 2 horizontal that were overlapping those verticals were focused on key operational aspects that it was going to take for Deutsche Telekom to enhance their operation efficiency and flexibility and make it easier for employees to get work done in new ways. Then, being an engineering company, they couldn't help that +1, which was a technology-focused area, which that year happened to be 5G. They had no idea how it was going to add business value to all the other areas, but they said, as engineers, we've got to include this area of technology, but we know it has to relate to the hashtag of the others. And what's key is not only did they focus all innovation efforts on these 5 areas, but these 5 areas represented both operational improvements and new ways of generating revenue. And that'll come up in the next set. That was the first principle, all right? Setting the parameters for test and learn. The second principle was really making it easier for teams throughout the organization to engage in these test and learn practices so that innovation wasn't limited to one specific area of the company. It became pervasive throughout the entire company. And one of the ways they went about fostering this new experimentation was by changing their funding model. Before, it was this annual process based on completely unrealistic business cases, and so they said no. Now we're going to do it based on a pitch where someone needs to come up with a pitch that is related to the 4+1 model, and we will give that effort an initial round of funding. So it's inspired by venture capital, and that first round of funding has to be based on a hypothesis. And if that, at the end of that first cycle, they generate some kind of evidence, end-user-based evidence that says this is worth funding because we can now develop an even better hypothesis based on this, then you'll get more funding. And so this iterative approach, available to anyone in the organization who had an idea that was related to the parameters, the 4+1, that's how they started fostering digital innovation throughout the company. And then finally, the third principle is about deepening engagement. They realized that it wasn't enough to just have a few stakeholders come in periodically to the team and then leave for the afternoon. They said anyone who has a stake in this innovation has got to be integral to the team throughout an entire iteration, 2 or 3 months, and that helped deepen the engagement at Deutsche Telekom. So that gives you a sense of the 3 principles that Deutsche Telekom put into practice and transformed the way they now realize significant value from their innovation investments and avoid the fondue sets. We're going to talk to our panelists about how they go about fueling innovation efforts in the organization, but I just want to share one last quick insight that I shared already last year. And as we think about the parameters for test and learn, we can think about some of this research that I've done on digital innovation, where I've looked at how companies are distributing their spend across 4 areas of innovation that are based on the objectives, the business value that we expect from the innovation effort. So this is in contrast to other portfolios that you may be aware of, that, for example, some portfolios are focused on degree of innovativeness. So there's like the 70-20-10 portfolio that looks at incremental innovations as 70% of the innovation, 20% that are maybe a little more radical, and then 10% that are really radical innovations, right? This is a very popular way of looking at our portfolio of innovation efforts that helps us identify to what extent are we being incremental in our innovations and to what extent are we being radical. However, that view doesn't help us avoid fondue sets, because fondue sets are essentially innovation efforts that are divorced from the business value that they're trying to realize, and hopefully it's relevant business value, right? We don't want to end up in creating a digital book reader when that wasn't the purpose of our organization, right? So really making sure that we're tracking our innovation efforts based on the kind of business value that they are intended to pursue, which means we have to articulate what kind of business value we're interested in. And basically, when we look at top performers, based on these 4 areas of innovation, 2 are blue, which are internal facing. Those are the business operations, where we're trying to increase operational efficiency and operational flexibility. And the other is employee experience, where we're trying to change and improve the way we get work done. Versus the 2 that are red. These are the revenue-generating innovations, and these are generating value from existing customers and generating value from new kinds of customers, or what other companies call new business models. Turns out that top-performing firms, when we look at, say, customer satisfaction, and we look at the average portfolio of top-performing firms with regards to customer satisfaction, on average, they are spending about 50% on the internal, blue, innovations and 50% on the external, revenue-generating innovations, a balanced approach. When we compare that portfolio with top performers with regards to revenue growth, again, we see a somewhat balanced approach, 40% versus 60% with the red. What's the right portfolio for your organization? How are you helping your organization set the parameters for test and learn? And how are you helping this top management make sure that the whole collection of innovation efforts isn't overweighting on one type of innovation at the cost of the others? You'll notice, for example, with customer satisfaction, a quarter on average of top performers are spending their innovation dollars on the employee experience. A quarter. Because if we're trying to increase the impact from the dollars that we spend on customer-facing innovations, we need to empower our employees to engage in test and learn. That means we need to change the way they work. We need to give them the resources to start building hypotheses, testing those hypotheses, and adapting accordingly. That requires a whole set of resources that our panelists are going to start illustrating for us. So with that, let's go to the panelists. And Brendan, if you could start, how do you go about fueling a growing number of innovation efforts that are trying to take a test and learn approach?
Brendan meaning Roman.
I'm sorry, Roman. I'm looking at you. Yes, sorry, Roman. Thank you.
So how do we fuel test and learn?
Please, yeah.
Look, fundamentally, I think when people talk about test and learn, they often talk about what you call innovation, experimentation, that warehouse in Berlin. For us, we're working at the core. That doesn't mean every single effort we'll launch will succeed, but we're not experimenting. We're changing the company, we're changing every process, every product, the way we work. So the way we organized our transformation agenda is in 3 horizons and 6 capabilities. And it's only 9 things, so it's not 64. So the 3 horizons, the first one is digitization. It's basically digitizing everything we do, processes, products. The way it is today, but digital. No manual interactions, no faxes. And we receive 12,000 faxes a day. The second one are client journeys. Same way consumer companies think about a client journey. Think of a mortgage. The whole journey from you want a house to you moved into the house. We're applying the same philosophy. And this is the second horizon.
And I'm sorry, and in your case, maybe if you could illustrate with some examples from each kind, just to also help those who aren't familiar with BNY Mellon.
Yeah, so BNY Mellon is institutional banking, right? So it's a B2B banking. So in our case, it's managing collateral for our clients. So that's equivalent of mortgage. And the third horizon is the creation of new digital businesses. Think about a world of data that we live in today, and the information can be anywhere. You can have a surfer in Bali picking up the trends on fashion, on sports equipment, before anybody knows in New York. So you take that data, you correlate it with the data the company already has, you put social sentiment, you put weather data, you create powerful insights. You can actually create businesses around that. So that's the 3 main horizons. And that goes to your point, we balance digitizing what we do today, addressing how we work with clients, and creating new businesses. We've been in business for 235 years. That's how we're securing the next 235.
And is that always been, have you always had this portfolio view based on business value, or is that a new introduction?
So we always obviously cared for business value, but there were a lot of experimentation, like you described, like everyone was doing. So we have 9 innovation centers globally.
Okay.
And one of the things about them, some of them were just cool. And to your point, it works for first 6 months. It works for first 12 months. So what we're using these innovation centers for are specific work to address specific client problems or build new products in a way that is cross-functional, co-located, clients are there, and that's really working. So that's one of the 6 capabilities that we're investing in.
So in addition to setting the parameters for these innovation efforts by identifying these 3 broad areas in which any innovation effort needs to fit into, you then have these 6 capabilities that these efforts can then draw on to fuel their efforts and really generate more value from any individual effort that fits into one of those 3.
That's right. So the 6 capabilities are, first is data. Second is partnerships. We're fundamentally open to the world. No single company, no single individual possesses the collective intelligence. So we're just harvesting the collective intelligence of the world for the benefits of our clients. That could be a small fintech that has something unique, but doesn't have a scale and reach and trust that we do. Or it could be a large company where we work under the formula what I call 1 + 1 = 3. Something that they have plus something that we have, 1 + 1 = 3. Client experience. You have to put client experience at the heart of what you do. The client doesn't care how you do it. That's our problem. They know what they get at the end. The 4th one would be what we call advanced digital solutions. So that's robotics, AI. That's obviously a big area of investment for us. And we can talk later about kind of what AI is doing. Innovation centers I mentioned. And the last one is delivery. And you'll say, hey, what's delivery? It's changing the way we work. It seems so easy, but obviously it's the hardest of all in a modern corporate culture.
So I'm going to go into several of those, but I want to get a flavor of what digital innovation looks like at Ricoh.
Sure. So we are a digital transformation company empowering digital workplaces. That's all we do for a living. So we are a company in transition. Having said that, we have a very similar approach. This number 3 is coming up again and again. So we have 3 by 3 by 3. First 3 is the foundation. I was talking to Josh this morning, and I was saying that the foundation is about mindset, skill set, and tool set. So mindset is the culture. What kind of a culture do we need for digital innovation? The skill set is you can have all the mindset, all the culture. Of course, Peter Drucker said, culture can eat strategy for breakfast. That can only happen if you have the skill set. So skill set is another focus. And the third one is, of course, you can have mindset, skill set, but if there's no tool set, you'll end up with the fondue. So that is the foundation. That is the first 3. On top of that sits the portfolio. And the portfolio is, again, the next 3. First, we say the customer wow. How can we generate customer wow? The second one is operational excellence, which is can we reduce some of the back office cost? Can we improve penetration in the sales side, so on and so forth. And the third one is new revenue streams. So that is the portfolio which sits on top of this foundation. And the third one is what he was talking, we call it the horizon, which is short-term horizon, mid-term horizon, and the moonshot. And the moonshot is our products, goods, and services. We know that when we sell our products, goods, and services, we can get cash flow. Why not sell that cash flow and make that a revenue stream? That's a moonshot project. Is it possible is a different thing. But blockchain might make it possible, but that's a moonshot project. So those are the kinds of things we are looking at. And when it comes to tool set, that is where what you're calling as fondue set, we have invented few things. One is we have a life cycle. We don't even start an MVP. We start with research and then go into emerging, and from emerging to mainstream to maintain to exit. And emerging is the MVP cycle. Even much before the MVP cycle, we might go from research to exit. That is based off of 2 in a box. We push down the objectives, not the strategy. Because it is digital world. I define digital world in 2 words: unconscious incompetence. Okay, you cannot drive the strategy down. right? We don't even know what the strategy will look like based off of the experimentation. But we can always push the objective and the baselines down. So that two in a box is that objective and baselines. For example, if my customer mean time to fix things is causing disruption for them, that is a baseline, and we can have an objective there. We can push that down and do some experimentation. But what is the strategic intent? We still don't know. Based on the experiment, we'll design that strategy later. So that is that two in a box. That's one of the things in the tool set. Before, about 3 years back, you were asking this question, how did innovation look like for you guys? It was all scrambled up and all over the place, right? If we need DevOps because we need to fail fast, okay, go invest in that thing. Start from Jira to GitHub, put everything, continuous integration, continuous delivery. But did that solve the issue? No. So that's the reason we boxed this 3 by 3 by 3. Foundation is important, portfolio is important, and the horizon is important. And that's how we are managing this digital.
Great. How about a Topcoder, the real Brendan?
So a couple things, I liked what I heard there I think there's a kind of a theme of empowerment. And so for my theme for the last couple of years has been to strengthen and sharpen the edge. I feel like that innovation comes from the edge. There's a lot of customer-driven innovation and a lot of folks in your organization who probably know your customers better than the C-suite does because they're interacting with them. So how do you empower them? And then when it comes to digital, maybe they know the business, maybe they even know some of the core systems and how the processes work, but they may not have the tool set themselves to be able to execute on those journeys. So then we try and help our customers get access to that digital talent. And then I think the other thing I liked there was the push down doesn't work. I think it's got to be a pull. So the edge is going to have to pull those things in. And so how do you empower them with guidelines and support? And so I've seen customers who are struggling to innovate and their business is just getting eroded. And they're saying how come we can't transform here? And so I'll be helping them find a place to use crowdsourcing, and we go to talk to them. And our kind of value prop is we can get you the talent tomorrow for what you want to do like that. And they say, well, now we got to go to vendor management. And that's a 6-month process. And I'm like, well, you just told me 3 weeks ago you're worried about using crowdsourcing because you're so agile as a company. We might not be fast enough. And we can run this project waterfall and we'll be done before your vendor management process happens. So taking those kind of processes, and that gets to your kind of 50% core, is how do you digitize those? Not just from cost savings, but from employee experience. I actually think the innovations you can do that drive new business models often depend on the digitization of that back office over time.
So I'm interested in this challenge that on the one hand, we're trying to give these teams greater autonomy, but if we just let them go off and do whatever they want to do, we risk accumulating fondue sets, right? So what would you highlight as helpful guardrails to guide these increasingly autonomous teams, empower them, really give them the resources that they need to deliver even greater impact, but guide them enough, so that they're not just going off and creating whatever they can innovate for the sake of innovation? Can you talk about guardrails in your organization that have proven helpful, but not too constraining?
I think there are a few of them. First of all, is how you work, how you put these teams together. If these teams are truly cross-functional, you're ultimately going to represent all various views. You're not going to have operations view overweigh the customer view.
That's a good point.
You're not going to have the risk view take over and forget that we need to do innovation. That's one. The second one, they need to build around the customer. If we're not doing this thing for the customer, why are we doing this thing? Yes, internal efficiency often is important, but ultimately, the customer is our guidepost. And the third one is a funding model. I really don't believe that you can fund somebody for 2 years or 3 years, say, this is a beautiful project plan, in 3 years we'll have this. You give them a little bit of money. If they deserve more, you give them more. If they deserve even more, they get that. If not, you shut them down. So people talk about kind of allowing teams to fail. I actually say often we need to allow teams to succeed. The corporate structures don't allow teams to succeed because people think about their own budget, their own department, their own agenda. So if you have the right goalposts, and if you actually allow people to succeed, they will.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree. The number of customers that we have and we've seen is where you can fail deploying the next version of ERP, but you followed the PMO structure, you made all the right budget requests, you did all your hiring through the right way. Hey, you followed all the processes. So yeah, I mean, a lot of money was spent, no value was added, the job's not done, but you did things right. It's like empowerment to fail.
Yeah,
versus the person who's like out there trying to break new ground and has the customers in mind, and it feels like they're fighting City Hall.
Yeah. We take the approach of time boxing as well as objective boxing. We don't want any experiment to go beyond certain time if it is in the experimentation. If it is gone into MVP, it is okay. We can have our cycles, sprint cycles, and so on and so forth. But we always time box it. On this entire research side of things, we also dollar box it.
You also?
Dollar.
Yep.
So we don't want to spend more than 2% of that innovation budget in just that experimentation. So we dollar box it, time box it, and objective box it, and we push it. And so it's an oxymoron. First we are saying, hey, we want people to be creative, but then we are putting these boundaries. But that oxymoron does work for digitization.
Yeah. Another guardrail are the shared resources that these teams draw on. You talked about 6 different areas that you're developing that these efforts can each draw on. Can you talk a little bit about those and how you go about, how do you learn what to develop? Because those aren't, I would assume those 6, what they actually consist of, you can't anticipate what's actually going to be needed until you've got teams actually telling you, look, this is the kind of data we need, or this is the kind of methods that we're trying to develop.
Yeah. Often companies create the supply constraint or demand constraint systems. The supply constraint system, we have innovation dollars, call it innovation fund, and everyone is fighting for that. And then you have the demand constraint, you actually build out the team, you have all these people, and then you're going to go and find somebody to take you on. I think neither approach works. What we're doing is we're just changing the way we work. So each individual effort is an instance of innovation, and all these innovations together, collectively, is our business strategy. So we don't have digital as a function. Digital is the business. We don't have a separate agenda. From the standpoint of a business unit X, we should do this. From the digital, we should do Y. If it's right for the business, it's right for digital, and vice versa. So I think once you inculcate that approach in your culture, in essence, you break off these artificial conundrums that people deal with.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I think you can see with like the people side that you're mentioning, where there's teams that get built to accomplish something, and maybe the business doesn't even really want to chase that goal anymore, and there's no way to shut it down. Right. It's like, what would these people do? How will we use them? Like, we'd have to do a layoff. We'd have to tell them all to find new jobs. Like, let's just keep doing the project, and inertia can keep you chasing yesterday's goals and not being able to pivot and have the agility at the business level versus the team organization level.
Brendan, you're in a particular situation where Topcoder is introducing talent to these teams, and as you look across, lots and lots of experiences, they're becoming savvy. I mean, the talent is one ingredient of many for a successful innovation effort.
Yeah.
Are you able to start advising the clients about the additional aspects, like saying, look, we've got the talent, but you're going to have to, really, to get value from this effort, you need better data or you need better methods.
Yeah.
Can you talk about like the other conditions that your talent needs to thrive in?
Sure. So I think one of the big things is a decision maker. And so often that decision making can be held too high from someone who's got a portfolio that's so broad, they actually can't impact anything. I've personally experienced this. My team's grown from like 2 or 3 people over the last 2 years to over 30. And I'm just like, I can't make these decisions anymore. I've got to distribute it. And so you're talking about organizations that may be a magnitude or even more bigger than what I'm dealing with. And I'm starting to get a little more empathy for some of the senior customers, what they're going through. But we say is like, if you're going to run this project, it could be as small as building some screens for a mobile app, and as big as like driving your microservice transformation. You've got to have someone who can say yes or no, because you've got all these talented people. They want to do work for you. They're coming back probably faster than you're used to the turnaround time, and they're saying, "Is this right? Do you have any more of this? Can you get me this so I can do this?" And if you have to go back to like the steering committee, for every penny, I think earlier this morning someone said, don't announce a 50 million digital transformation journey. And I think most of the people who announce the $50 million digital transformation spend that money like 1 cent at a time. And it's not, I'd rather have a customer that says like, hey, we're gonna do 50 or 500 and let the people who can actually make these decisions make it. So that's a big one that I see across all the different types of projects.
Cool.
Actually, the decision I hate to agree, but I have to agree. One thing we found out is exactly what he's talking about. In our organization, we are so used to everyone running up to this person who knows everything, kind of a thing. So 2 things were happening. Because of that decisions always coming up, the organization was not learning how to make the decisions. Okay, number 1. Number 2, then the person became a bottleneck, not for digital, but for the entire innovation and the progress of the company. So when people started coming to me, hey, what should I do? It's what do you want to do? Tell me. So we started pushing that decision downward. And that started giving them, and then they were like, oh my God, if I make a mistake, it is okay. It is okay to make a mistake. It's okay to learn.
Can you elaborate on that? How do you go? I mean, it's easy to say, and I think everyone here would be nodding their head, but a lot of executives that I talk to struggle to put that into practice.
Yeah, actually, it was a little difficult for us because the person who had to make the decision, one is if they don't have that skill set to make the decision, they start accumulating a lot of data. Our whole thing is if you have all the data to make the decision, it's no more called a decision because you have all the data. Data is telling you this is the way to go.
Yeah.
If you don't, decision means there is a path, there is a fork. You have to come back with some sort of a mindset to make that decision. So that is one. The second one we did is two-in-a-box concept. We said, look, if you don't understand the objective which was pushed down to make that decision at this stage, we also have that business expert, two-in-a-box. And between the two of you, you should be able to make the decision. So that's the way we approach it. But are we 100% successful? No. Sometimes they do come running saying, no, it's too big. But it's OK. We are trying that as we go.
So I have to admit, I was struggling with my phone because I thought I had downloaded Slido correctly. So I apologize. I thought I had access to that. Otherwise, but we can just call hands the old-fashioned way. But thank you, Ben. Appreciate it. Cool. So these are these the questions that have been asked?
There was another.
That's the poll. OK, great. So.
Questions are live. We can put it on the screen.
OK. And is there a way to see them? OK, great. Why don't we do that? Sorry.
Nils, there was a comment.
Yeah, just while you sort the technical things. I mean, one thing we're relatively small. I think the core Topcoder business, a little over 100 people. But one thing, we're now almost 20 years old, so we actually now have like some technical debt and legacy. We've been really pushing across the whole company is just the ability to form dynamic teams and go up. Permission to go up, permission to go up and out. So not necessarily up your management chain, but if you're in sales, go talk to the CTO. If you're here, and pull those teams together. And I don't think I wouldn't say we've mastered it, but I think that's something like that two-in-a-box concept is permission to kind of ask questions, pull teams together, and then let them disperse can help drive that empowerment and that decision-making ability.
Regarding the empowerment, I'd love for you to elaborate on this 6th capability, which you've highlighted as new ways of working. Can you tell me a bit more about, or tell us more about what that consists of and what you've emphasized? Because it seems to complement what they've been emphasizing.
Yeah, so each of these capabilities is, in essence, 2 things. One is a competency center, and the second is a community. So let's take maybe advanced digital solutions. So AI is a part of that. We have 52,000 people. AI can help each and every single person. It can help our advisors, the human advisors for wealthy clients. The robo-advisors actually helping human advisors to be a lot more effective. AI can help our lawyers to go through the contract database. We have 1 million contracts, 1 million contracts. Our oldest contract was dated in 1920. That's still in force. It's going to celebrate 100 years. So AI exists throughout the company. So how do you channel that? So we have a small group of people that actually understand the power of AI, they understand the use cases, and they do what I call community management. In essence, deploying various techniques against the entire population of the company.
Sorry.
So no, that's sort of one example, and that's kind of how it applies to others. The partnership group, again, they talk to VCs, they talk to PEs, they talk to the startups, but we want every employee to have an open mind and actually be inclusive and not develop things themselves to look at the partnerships. But that group kind of channels the innovation and facilitates the process.
Got it. So I'm sorry, I am not familiar with how to find the questions that folks are asking, but in the meantime,
Just ask live.
Yeah. We're going to do this the old-fashioned way, if that's all right. Sorry. If there's any questions, just feel free to put your hand up, and we'll get it from the audience. In the meantime, how do I get to the next poll? There we go, and that's how I shut it off before. Sorry. Okay, cool. And then, so I'm interested in actually this other poll about leadership. I wanted to go into the implications of these new ways of working, of these increasingly empowered teams, cross-functional, that are drawing on these resources that you folks are making available to them to avoid the fondue sets. What are the implications on leadership? One of the things, for example, that I've seen is that increasingly, to foster innovation, leaders need to be able to say no to innovation efforts. And identifying which efforts to say no to is a big challenge. Can you address that aspect about how to either help leaders say no or the teams themselves stop and adapt an innovation effort that they're engaged in? What helps?
I think you need to say, every time you say no, it's a chance to actually, you're saying no for a reason, assuming, okay. Right? And someone comes in and say, hey, we should put this kind of offering together. And maybe I'm like, no, we're not going to do that. But really, maybe the real answer is, no, we've actually been at this for 15 years, and there's some history here, there's some education here. And now if I can take that out of my head and get it into the team's head, and then that's like the fix once, not just say no, but no, and up-level the knowledge. But then also think is there a way to fix this systematically? Are we not sharing enough of our tribal knowledge in a way that when we onboard people or in our brown bags, whatever we do as a team to kind of help people out, become more expert on the company? Because if a lot of the growth has been in the last year or two, there's a lot of people who've been here less than 3 years. Mm-hmm. So they're working with customers who've been working with us for 10. Mm-hmm. And so if we don't up-level them, so I always try and think is how do I use this interaction as a way to help improve the skill of the team member, but also is this a sign that there's something systematic we're missing the chance to be better at?
Cool.
Yeah. In our case, there is an opportunity for leaders to say no, but that is not for the experiments, but for the behaviors. Mm-hmm. For example, in our company, knowledge was very powerful. The person who knew the most was very, very powerful. So we start pushing out. We said, no, collaboration is more power. Anytime we do hackathon, if you guys can form a group and come back, that is what we are rewarding, instead of somebody coming saying, oh, I have this kumbaya thing. So leadership's job is to push the guardrails, the boundary conditions, and the behaviors of knowledge is not power anymore, collaboration is power, let's go that way, so on and so forth. But the actual experimentation itself, we should push that decision downwards and empower the teams.
And I like that you earlier emphasized also the importance for making it easier for the leaders themselves to learn about what's working and what's not working with regards to those conditions, the guardrails, et cetera.
Yeah.
That seems to be another key aspect.
I think people simplify this stuff. They think that the big decisions have yes and no. In my mind, there are thousands, tens of thousands, micro decisions. It's a micro yes and micro no that kill people. You know, I've been a management consultant before I took this job, and I work in digital, and I found the one group in every single company that stopped the progress. This group is called they. There's always good us, and this bad they. And this bad they stop a good us from doing the right thing. You try to do something, and they say, and somebody in the team says, "Yeah, of course we wanted to do the right thing, but they did not," and they describe what they did not do. But I yet to meet a person that said, "Hello, my name is they." You know, address me at that, you know, they at, you know, whatever, you know, bankx.com. So that's the whole point. The decision, executive committee makes a decision, we're going to invest in product X. Then somebody doesn't have a budget, somebody doesn't have a resource, somebody doesn't have a room, somebody doesn't have a desk, and that big decision, big yes, turns into a no. You know, you can call it a death of 1,000 cuts, I call it a death of 1,000 no's. Quite opposite. You make a decision, no, we will not experiment with blockchain, we will only, you know, build 3 products based on a blockchain. And then people experiment, and a vendor calls, and you take that call, and you have, you know, this, you know, little team working on this thing, and in essence, you spend a lot of energy in a half-funded, half-resourced way to achieve nothing, because that no still was a no.
So we've discussed a bit about ensuring that individual innovation efforts avoid becoming a fondue set, right? Avoid developing an innovation that's nice to have, but at the end of the day, adds little, if any, value. Let's talk about the other broader challenge of the portfolio as a whole, where we're trying to ensure that we are both as a company digitizing, improving operations, becoming more efficient, becoming more flexible, and becoming more digital. We are developing new sources of revenue from existing customers, as well as completely new customers, and really figuring out what's the best balance for our organization across these portfolio of efforts, given where we're coming from and where we want to go. How do you help manage, you know, the portfolio of efforts?
I mean, we have a balanced portfolio, as I described. The 3 horizons. One is core digitization, which is basically, you know, it's your word, digitization. We changing the way we do things today. Horizon 2 are the client journeys. It's now a lot about revenue. And the Horizon 3 are about creating new businesses.
And is this something that's reviewed like once a year, or how often is?
So we review that on a dynamic basis. So within each of the portfolios, there are reviews.
Got it.
And then there is a balancing of the 3. But what we chose not to do, and I actually think it's important, is not to say 40% here, 30% there, 40% here. I think kind of whoever does that creates a competition. Oh, I want to be called portfolio 3. I want to be the 1. I could not get money as 1, so let me rephrase this thing and now compete for the 2. Each effort needs to stand on its merit. So when we talk about, you know, what's more important, digitization or digital, kind of using your words, I say that's what's more important is eating or drinking. You have to do both to survive. And yes, maybe without one you can survive slightly longer than the other, but both are essential. So yes, you have to digitize, and yes, you have to be digital.
Cool. At Ricoh?
At Ricoh, you know, we started creating some tool sets like pie charts and everything to examine the portfolio. But now we are taking the approach of smell of money, color of money. Let's not say this pie chart is not balanced. If you get more money in a different angle, let's go hit it. So that's the approach we are taking. Yeah.
Okay. And how about our Topcoder, where, you know, we've got this range of different efforts that we may need talent for. Do you help companies figure out, you know, what kind of talent it makes most sense for, you know, the kind of outcome that we're trying to realize?
So in the kind of spirit of edge decision making, we actually don't match talent to projects. We broadcast projects and let the talent self-select in. And what the research we've done with universities shows is there's a 10x value in self-selection over incremental payments. So basically, people work a lot harder and a lot more passionate about stuff they opt into, which has kind of informed my perspective with how we do things internally. In terms of portfolio selection, I mean, I agree is the digitization and the transformation stuff are both important. I think a lot of the top-down budgeting processes, portfolio decomposition processes, things like that, have two risks that come with them. One is it's not just like we're going to put some investment here, 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 broad pictures, and if we, it is a fixed sum sometimes. And if we have to move things around, we'll have flexibility. That's actually easier, I think, for companies to say. What happens is it's like, and this money is going to hiring people, and this money is going to this SI, and this money is going here. And then they're locked into the types of ways they're going to spend the money this year. And they have like no flexibility in how they solve the problems, even if they want to change which problems they do. And the second part is just the decomposition of the portfolio forces the architecture of the solution onto the team, and kind of limits the ability to innovate. So, hey, by the time this project gets down to here, the people actually implementing it, all these other architectural decisions have sort of been enforced, and really those are things that you might want to inform at the edge. And so I think companies that have taken like really strong microservice kind of platform API first type approaches in both sides of the digital and the digitizations are starting to see like a virtuous cycle there, and the ability to kind of keep that flexibility for as long as possible.
So again, if there's any questions, please just use your hand and we'll call on you. Yes?
So from the opposite end of the large to small spectrum, if you're coming into a new organization that really doesn't have a toolkit and definitely is gathering the data to try and answer more specifically this question, but do you have any recommendations about trying to find the right priorities of which pieces of which toolkit to go into, or how to figure that out?
So if I'm with an organization that doesn't have a toolkit, where do I start? Where do you recommend I start?
I think every organization has a toolkit, first of all. There is no organization that is so purely physical. There is no organization that's purely digital either, right? I mean, when we talk about Amazon or Google, I mean, this is very physical companies with warehouses and data centers. So I think the question is about finding the right toolkit for your particular problem or for this particular person, and actually matching the toolkit to the purpose. So that's why we have different horizons, different capabilities. But after all, this is just the people making decisions. We talk about AI. AI empowers us to make decisions. We talk about data innovation. All these things are the tools for the people to do the right thing.
Although I want to just explore that a bit further, because you've got quite a rich toolkit, right? These 6 different aspects that include methods, data, talent. I mean, there's a whole variety in there that took time to really develop and enrich in. And so do you start with the data? Do you start with the communities of practice? Do you start with the groups that are inspiring others about what blockchain can and can't do? Or like, where do you start with all that? Or you have to do it all at once?
I think you start with the client. And when I say with the client, it's not just the client needs asking them what exactly you want. It's really starting with the client's fundamental needs. And when I say that, think about you call the call center, you had some interaction, and at the end of the call, they say, how would you rate that interaction? You say, great. So is the client need to have a great interaction with call center? Of course not. The client need is to actually solve the problem. So if you start there, you understand the problem, and then you actually think what capabilities we need to deploy that.
I think that's phenomenal advice, is really start understanding clearly the needs of a focused set of customers that you want to understand in a much richer way, and really let that drive the development of the toolkit. And I know at Ricoh you're doing the same. Can you maybe describe a bit about the evolution and how it's focused on the customer?
Yeah. Actually, the objective, customer, our new revenue stream, our operational, whatever objective we are pushing down, But the existing tool sets also will work in some of the cases. What's important, I said the word unconscious incompetence. The objective is just to get to conscious incompetence. What that means is create a closed loop system and see your existing. This portfolio management has been happening with IT organizations forever. Okay, so can you recycle some of that existing? Technology lifecycle management has been happening. Can I use that for seeing if I should start an MVP or not? You can.
Yeah.
So create a closed loop system and use that existing tool sets to start with. And see if you have a failure point, throw the tool out or improve the tool. That's how we have learned. Start with existing tool sets, create a closed loop system, and keep going.
Yeah. I mean, I would say is also, when it comes to tool sets, if they're leading, you run the risk of specificity, and over rigidity. So, hey, for source code management, you have to use this, you have to do this, these are the platforms you can use. Well, then one of the platforms you can't use comes out with really great AI capabilities, and your teams are locked out of it. Or over rigidity, which is there's no flexibility, there's no ability to go from a waterfall methodology to an agile one, or vice versa. And so I think to avoid those, it's more about the culture of stewardship, where the end people are allowed to make these decisions, but they understand that they have a responsibility of stewardship. So if they bring in a new tool set or they bring in a new thing, they understand what that means. Because, hey, we're going to go bring in a new email platform because we don't like this one and we don't like that one, but at the margins they're basically the same. That would be poor stewardship. But bringing in a new cloud platform that has like really differentiated AI capabilities, that may be a good, 1,000 feet up or 10,000 feet up. Those literally look like the same decision, but from a viewpoint of stewardship at the edge, it's very different.
We've got time for one more question, and then I'll ask you guys for a closing thought on avoiding these two pitfalls that we started off with. Yes, please.
You have to have your data and analytics before you move on to toolkits, because a lot of organizations I've been looking at, they go in U-turns all the times. Every 6 months they U-turn because they don't have their data analytics, and they come up with the guesses. By the way, my name is Ali Karimi. I represent IEEE, and I'm part of the consultant to the federal government and other hats I do have. But the way I see it, a lot of C-levels, they make a U-turn all the time because they don't have their data analytics. You got tons of the data, but you cannot pick on one data. You have to have your data analytics. Based on data analytics, you number them, then you move on. But I want to know your opinion.
So sustaining this focus, particularly at the top management levels, helping them, really focus on what's essential and then sustain that focus so they're not engaging in these U-turns constantly.
Look, I mean, everyone has data. Data is like oil; it just sits in the ground, right? So you just need to extract it. So when people say, "Oh, do we not have enough data?" No, you have data. You just haven't put it to use. Now, how do you put it to use? That's what I talk about is empowered cross-functional teams. Because they challenge each other, you create a system that actually works on its own. Because if you send a CFO to get data, and you send a CRO to get data, and you send a head of sales to get data, they'll get you data.
Yeah. I work with a guy who says he can make the data say whatever he wants it to say.
Right.
I think there's a risk of that. I think, when I hear the U-turn, I don't think that kind of direction gets really set at that level by data, right? It's that customer empathy, understanding what problem you truly solve for your customer, and then decomposing that thinking across your portfolio. Because a company, a startup that's trying to do one thing versus a huge conglomerate, that portfolio decomposition is highly differentiated. And I mean, if you're a Fortune 10 company and you're doing a U-turn ever, something's gone really wrong.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just data.
The data, it's a really good question. Data is an issue for lots of companies. I will bet my baby's milk money. You take the top 100 Fortune 100 companies and ask them to define their customer. And you go ask marketing, you go ask finance, and you ask sales. You'll get 3 different definitions. So how can you get the data right if the definitions are wrong, right? So what we have to realize is not having that consistency is the new norm. That should not stop you from digitizing and going towards it, right? So the new norm is that you will never get the data to 100% accuracy. It's almost impossible. But it's okay to just have 80% accuracy and get some heuristics for your experiments.
Yeah.
That's the approach we are taking.
Yeah, incrementality.
So in closing, I was just going to ask, what one aspect would you emphasize in order to avoid accumulating fondue sits or binging?
I would emphasize, embrace kind of the collective intelligence of the world. Because if you're going to collect the fondue sets for yourself, you'll have too many. The world may need that many. So, to be kind of more practical, if you have an open system, it allows you to solve specific customer problems, and we talk about a customer, we celebrate a customer, in a way that you don't need to exert all your energy. Somebody else may be doing 90% of the work. You combine your power, with somebody else's skill, and you actually, do something fit for purpose.
Collaboration. Actually, during yesterday's dinner, you said something significant. You said we have to learn to learn. I think that is more significant now than ever. We have to go through the process of how do we collaborate with our peers. Right now, I'm sitting with them. I'll send a LinkedIn and say, how did you do it? Here is my tool set. Where is your tool set? So on and so forth. I think collaboration and learning how to learn in this digital economy, that is very key.
Great.
I would say is strengthen and sharpen your edge, and your edge are probably employees. So how do you empower them? How do you get them their guidelines? How do you flatten the organization so it's more effective and more people are doing instead of reporting? Right. Those are big challenges, but I think they're addressable incrementally.
Well, please join me in thanking my panelists, Roman, Kris, and Brendan. Thank you.